to promote student engagement while maintaining a structured classroom. Today I'm going to talk about a research study I have been conducting in my classroom. My research study is focusing on using math games in a math classroom to promote student engagement and increase student learning. But more so than just implementing those games, I'm focusing on how to maintain classroom structure while using these games. I came across this idea of wanting to do this because when I first started teaching math, I stuck closely to my math curriculum. So every day we would do the same things in class. We would do the application problem. I would teach the lesson. We would practice the math skill together. My students would practice on their own, and then we would extend the math lesson with word problems. At first, it was working fine with my class and my students, but I noticed that as time went on, the students who were eager to learn and loved learning math, those students were still succeeding and participating in the math lesson. But I noticed the kids who didn't have a natural drive to want to learn math, they were struggling to pay attention. They didn't have a hook. They didn't have a reason to want to learn. So this made me want to use math games in my classroom. When I started using math games, I noticed that it was chaotic. We were playing games, but it was more of juggling behaviors and cheating, and people were focusing more on the game than math. So this made me want to choose for my study using math games to increase motivation and engagement, but also to how can you do that while having classroom structure. So my research focus question is, how can a math game be implemented in a lesson to increase student involvement and success while maintaining a structured classroom? So I conducted a lot of research to figure out what are the best kinds, how can you use, what kind of math games should you use in class. So I found research on the benefits of games, what types of games to play, and when and how to use games. I also found research on how to implement games. This doesn't have anything to do with how to implement games and having classroom structure, but like how should you use math games in your classroom. So first, the benefits of games. They increase motivation and positive attitudes towards math. They provide opportunities to use mathematical vocabulary, differentiate instruction by, when a group of kids on a lower level is playing math games, they can use manipulatives or have different rules or different questions for the games. Or if it's a group, like a higher group, they can have more complex questions. And then another benefit of games is you can create a homeschool connection. That means the kids can play the game in class, and then they can go home and teach the game to their parents, and they can practice reciprocal teaching because they're teaching their parents the game and also having to teach their parents or siblings the math concept as well. So types of games to play in class, or types of games to play include, these are the characteristics. They should be engaging. You should be able to win with skill and luck. The luck factor levels out the playing field for students, because if it's only on skill, the students who, like the higher achieving students, are always going to win. But if there's a luck factor, then it levels out the playing field. Third, they should be centrally focused on a math skill. More specifically, just one math skill to focus on. The rules should be flexible, so you can use them with different math concepts. You can use the same game over a stretch of skills. And again, they should be able to have a homeschool connection, and they should facilitate math investigations. Games that you should play, they should focus on an isolated skill practice. So there's two ways you should use games. You should either use them to focus on one skill, or you should use them as an early introduction to a new skill. And also, they should be played, if you're using it as an isolated skill practice, it should be played after being taught the lesson. So a teacher should teach a lesson, they should have practice, and then they could play the game. It should never be, let's play this game to learn and then test on the skill. How to implement games. A teacher should teach the game to everyone at once. The teacher should play with the students or walk around and make sure students are playing the game correctly and doing the math correctly. And teachers should keep annotated notes on student progress. So like who's achieving the math skills and who's struggling with that math skill. Okay. The research design I used in my classroom was a quasi-experimental quantitative research design. I tried 3 different implementation strategies with my research. It went from the least structure to the most structure, so I can see what the level of who's succeeding and where kids are less structured but also still achieving, and trying to find a happy medium between the two. So before my research, we did STAR Math pretest. And then my study was with my 4th grade math classroom. There were 25 students that were in the study. So first, it lasted for 8 weeks. My first week, we did the whole, my kids played the game whole group, and I let them choose their partner. I knew that this wouldn't be the best way to do it, but I wanted to get the data from maybe there's some struggling kids could pair with a higher kid, just to see how it matched up. And then we did that for a week. The second week we did the second strategy, which was whole group, and I chose their partner. We did that for a week. And then the third strategy we did on the 3rd week, it was small groups. So we did small group rotations. After I taught the lesson and we practiced, we went to small groups. One group came to me. I taught the lesson. We played the game together. And when we did that, we just played the game as one group. And then the other groups were doing other small group activities. But when the group was with me, we were answering the questions together. People were taking turns explaining how they got their answer. And yeah, it was just a group activity. The small group participation was the most beneficial. And so we continued that with the next 4 weeks. We did, and while we were, the first 3 weeks were showing me what was the best way to maintain structure. And then the next 4 weeks were using that strategy to achieve promote student engagement and achieve our learning goals. After the 8 weeks, we completed a STAR Math post-test. When I analyzed my data, the types of data I used were quantitative data. They all had to do with numbers. So during each week of the first 3 weeks, I monitored my student engagement. So how many kids were playing the games. And so when they were playing the games, how many students were engaged. And then when they got finished, I took notes of how many students were successful. And then for the STAR Math, we took STAR Math before to give me a starting point. And then we took STAR Math after to see the growth. So the findings, student engagement was the highest for small group. That's because so the first week when they were partner of their choice, as I suspected, the distracted kids were distracting their partners as well. So like if let's say I had 3 kids that really struggle with focusing on math, they took those 3 kids took 3 more kids and distracted them. So that makes 6 kids that were really distracted. So the next week I did, again, whole group, but I chose their partners. And those 3 kids were still really struggling to pay attention. But I paired them with a high learner who's really focused. So it wasn't as many students distracted. And then the last group, I had the most participation because they were with me and we could really work together. And so most of them were able to focus and they were successful. I didn't put a chart on here to show this, but this shows the success was also very similar to the student engagement. So week 1, the success was lower, and then it was a little bit higher in the second week, and then it was the highest in the third week when they were doing the small group with me. Because even those really low students, they were working with me and we're working with their group, and we can work together to make sure we get the right answers. And I grouped the students in a way where each group was equally, I had mixed high kids with low kids. So each group was as equivalent as I could make it because there were varying questions, high questions and low questions. And I wanted in each group, I wanted to have a student that could answer those high questions. So I made them mixed grouping. The second chart shows my student growth. I had 80% student growth, and 20% of the students didn't show growth. But it might be where they were high and they just did really good on that first test and maybe not so high on the second test. Okay, so at the end of my study, I found that the most beneficial way to use math games in a math classroom, the way you get the most engagement and you get the most student success, that is with small group participation. It should be noted that small group participation does take a lot more time, but once you see it in action and you see those low kids that are normally very hard to focus and distract in others, when you do them in the small group and you see them participate and you see them having fun in that game because they have almost kind of like your hand to hold and they feel successful, it's very rewarding to see those kids benefit from that. And it's more important to go slower and to reach more kids than to go faster and reach more content at a faster rate. So from my research, I found it showed me the benefit of using small group participation. I hope this research study can reach other new educators that are entering the math field, and they can see my study and they can know that it is beneficial to use small groups versus whole group instruction. All right, well, thank you for your time.